PHP is a server-sided language used to create dynamic web pages. By dynamic, I mean that the actual content changes based on some kind of event. PHP originally stood for Personal Home Page. However, the name has been changed to PHP Hypertext Preprocessor. What that means is the language processes the data and turns it into HTML. So the language generates the HTML and sends it down to the browser. Therefore, the web page is dynamic, as opposed to being static, which means that the code that was written once and never changed. PHP is processed on the server, not in the browser. Therefore, it needs to be executed from a web server. You cannot just click a file and have it open in the browser. The page itself must have a PHP extension so the server recognizes it and knows to process it. PHP is a scripting language. It is not a compiled language such as C or Java. It is designed to do something after an event occurs, such as sending a form to the server. The PHP code is embedded inside the HTML web page. So we have a standard HTML web page to start out with. PHP is a free software. It is cross-platform. It is extremely popular and relatively easy to use in comparison to other languages such as Java. Let's take a look at what we mean by client-sided scripting or a client-sided language. We have three popular web languages: HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. They are client-sided languages. They are processed by the browser. The browser reads the code and interprets the code and displays the result in the browser. These are called static because the code we write does not change. If you look at the view source, that code is the same as the code in your editor. So when you type in a web address in a web browser and you're requesting a client-sided file, that request is sent to the server. The server looks at that extension, .html, .css, .js. It realizes that it's a static file, and it just sends it back to you. It doesn't have to look at it. It doesn't have to process it. It sends it back to the client. The client, which is the browser, processes that code and displays the result in the browser. Server-sided languages or server-sided scripting work differently. If you were to type in an address in the browser which requests a server-sided file such as PHP, the request would be sent to the server. The server would see that it's a PHP extension, and rather than sending that file back to the browser or to the client, it would first open it up, process that code, convert the code into some kind of content, which includes HTML, and then send the information all back to the browser or the client. So this is what we mean by a dynamic web page. The code that we send up is changed, and something different is sent back. It's processed on the server, converted into HTML, and sent back to the browser. PHP is a very common server-side language. You might also be familiar with active server pages, Java server pages, or Python, which are also server-side languages. Some important concepts. A PHP file must be executed from the web server. You cannot just click on the file and expect it to load in a browser. Also, it must have a PHP extension. You cannot write PHP code into an HTML file with an HTML extension. It will not be processed. We need to install PHP on our computers. We do that using the XAMPP software package. XAMPP is a cross-platform package that will install the Apache web server, the MySQL database, PHP which is a browser-based database administration tool. It also includes the Perl language, which we would not be using in this class. So XAMPP stands for Cross-Platform, Apache, MySQL, PHP and Perl. PHP will be installed on the C drive in a XAMPP folder. The XAMPP folder will contain other folders. Most of them belong to the software itself. However, I would like to draw your attention to the htdocs folder. This is the root of your web server. All of your web files go here. So any file that you create that you want to test, your websites that contain PHP files, all have to be placed inside the htdocs folder, or you will not be able to view them. When you install XAMPP, a default index.php file will be installed in the root. As you should be aware, this will automatically load when you type in the address of your web server. Therefore, you cannot see your files and folders, which makes it difficult to test. I recommend renaming any index.html or index.php files so that you can see your directory structure or your folder structure so that you can access the files that you want to work with.